another concern that people have been talking about for years, especially in prophetic senses, has been implants, microchipping. And that's become quite popular today. It's actually, in some ways, it's kind of old news. It was really in the 90s, maybe late 80s, but in the 90s, where Bible prophecy experts started talking about that the mark of the beast might be a microchip. Before that, it was they would say it was like a tattoo or like a barcode that would be tattooed on your skin or on your hand or on your forehead. Then it went into RFID microchipping, and there are still some who say that. Most recently, the most recent idea kind of falls more in line with biohacking, that somebody might alter their genome to where they're not even considered human anymore. And maybe that is the mark of the beast because Jesus Christ died for human beings, for the salvation of humans, not hybrids, not Nephilim, not angels, not any of that stuff. But there is still some concern about microchipping. And it might not be the mark of the beast. It might be something that leads to it. Could be that. But it might not be the exact mark of the beast. But for those who might be unfamiliar with where microchipping is today, I wanted to bring this up and talk about it, and then, of course, get your opinion. You could leave a comment or email me. But this comes from Thomas Nett. So it says, in the not-too-distant past, computers were massive machines that could fill an entire room, but today they fit in the palm of our hands. And that's exactly right. I mean, all of us have, most of us anyway, just have a cell phone that fits right in the palm of your hand. And this is more powerful than computers, normal just home computers were not that long ago, a decade or two ago. And they're poised to become more powerful than even most computers today. But it says, for some, the next step in this ever-shrinking and evolving system is a microchip, no bigger than a grain of rice implanted directly into the body. While this may sound like the beginning of a dystopian sci-fi novel, it's actually a growing trend among a few technologically savvy individuals. There are people today that are microchipped. There are people that have implants in their hands, and they can turn their computer on or unlock their door with it. A while ago, if you've been following Into the Multiverse for a while, a long time ago, we interviewed Zoltan Istvan, who's the leader of the Transhumanist Party, and he is microchipped. So we talked to him about that. You guys can go back in the archives of the show and check out that interview if you want. You should. It was really interesting, really enlightening. So that is a thing that's happening today, but it says the use of embedded body microchips is categorized under the spectrum of biohacking, which is basically an umbrella term that covers a wide range of do-it-yourself practices, most of which involve the application of a systems thinking mindset to the human body. What it all boils down to is it's meant to improve the human body. Now, the way they sell it, and this is important to keep in mind, the way they sell this is by saying, well, we're just trying to cure heart disease or cure cancer. And I'm sure there are people out there that are well-meaning and they're using it for that. But we can't only look at that. We have to look at how it's going to be abused. With anything like this, you can't just look at the good intentions, because we're never going to fully, as a human race, we're never going to fully commit to whatever the best of intentions are. There will be people that are going to abuse it. So there are two sides of that coin. There's the good intention side and there's the abuse side. How will this be abused, and do those risks outweigh the good that could be done? Because there are things that you can do to help with heart disease or help with cancer. We're actually going to be doing an interview in just a little bit with a couple of health experts that talk about just that very thing. You don't need biohacking. There are other avenues of research that could be done. There are things that you could do at home, but that's how they'll sell it. And then they'll say that if you're not on board, then you must be a heartless human being, because don't you want to see cancer cured? Of course, we all do. My son had cancer at 5 years old, T-cell leukemia. Of course, that would be great if that didn't happen. But at the same time, there are other things that can be done that you don't need biohacking. You don't need microchips in order to do that. By the way, my son is in full remission. He is fine. He still has to go through a couple more years of maintenance therapy to make sure it doesn't come back. But besides that, he's great. So there are other avenues available, and research into those areas can make them better and better. But that's usually how they'll frame it. So it's important to keep that in mind. What's really going on, though, it's not going to stay at just restorative efforts, curing somebody of heart disease or cancer. It's not going to stay there. It's going to move to enhancement, and that's the problem. That is taking God's design and trying to mold it and shape it into our own image as human beings. Now, we call it enhancement, but it's not really enhancement at all because it goes outside of God's design. We all remember what happened in Genesis 6 when the angels thought that they would make something in their own image, and they tried to enhance human beings. Look what happened with that. We got the flood not too long after that. Now, it continues on. It says, imagine being able to do everything you do with your smartphone now, but even faster. Imagine being able to enter your home, workplace, or car with just the slightest hand gesture. Imagine sending someone your information by pointing your finger at their phone. And by the way, this paragraph right here is not science fiction. If it'll let me highlight it. A lot of this is available right now. A lot of this is available today. You can actually get an implant in your hand that will unlock your doors. And a lot of this is being advanced. So it says that's exactly what these biometric chip implants are currently being designed to do. It serves as a way to connect people to IoT, meaning the Internet of Things, in a much more physical way by integrating the Internet of Things with the Internet of your own body. Now, for anybody who says, well, that's just the way future's going, that's where technology's progressing, that's just, it's not anything to worry about. People were worried about the internet and, we're pretty much okay. Well, think about how the internet has been abused. Again, you can't just look at the good intentions of the effort. You have to look at how it's going to be abused. More and more articles are coming out showing how Google and Facebook, they're recording your audio from your phone. They could be recording this conversation right now. They're actually recording it so they know how best to target ads to you, but it's an invasion of privacy. They're constantly being criticized for this, and it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's been proven to actually occur. So imagine how much more that could be abused if this is integrated through your whole body, through a microchip or a brain implant or whatever they're developing today. Imagine how much more that could be abused. But now it's not just in your phone, because you can throw away your phone. You can get rid of your phone. You can cancel your internet. You can do a lot. But it's not just in your phone. Now it's in your body. Not so easy to get rid of. So you got to look at where this stuff leads. So how do these things work? It says these microchips utilize radio frequency identification, that's RFID, and near field communication, that's NFC. So RFID microchips can be used as passwords or keys, while the NFC chips can be used to store electronic credit cards or cryptocurrencies. And that's another way that they'll try to say it. It's safer. It's harder to hack. Anybody can steal your credit card, but it's a lot harder to steal a chip out of your hand. All right, fair enough. But again, there are security measures that you can go through where you don't have to chip your hand. There are measures available. There are ways that you can protect your privacy online today without having to microchip anything. So it says the implants themselves are shaped like cylinders which contain a biologically safe epoxy resin, the microchip, and a copper antenna coil. Designed without a battery or power source, they remain inactive until they come within the field range of a reader device, which communicates with the device through a magnetic field. So who's actually using this? It says that according to some in the biohacking community, as many as 100,000 people worldwide have willingly hacked their own bodies with microchip implants. Now, I will say, microchip implants, I don't think it's a good idea, but with an implant, it should only affect the person who has the chip. It's not the same as editing your genome and then passing that on throughout generations or passing that on in the environment around you. If you get a chip, it's probably not going to affect your neighbor too much. Now, again, I don't think it's a good idea for people to be chipping themselves. But in those regards, I think it's up to us as Christians or as scientifically minded people to convince the culture, to convince people why it's a bad idea. With that, I think legislative efforts are a little bit different because I wouldn't see this necessarily as like a public health crisis or a potential epidemic, at least not in that way. But even then, there would be caveats with that. When they develop microchips enough to be able to edit your genome from the chip itself, then that crosses over into an area where it can affect future generations or possibly even the environment, depending on how it works. But as many as 100,000 people worldwide have willingly hacked their own bodies with microchip implants. Most people would not realize that it's that big of a deal or it's that widespread of a problem, but it is, 100,000. It says the trend is particularly popular in Sweden. So in 2018, it was reported that since 2015, so that's just a 3-year span, that over 4,000 Swedes had opted to have these tiny microchips implanted in them under their skin. So far, these tiny chips are mostly used to open doors and send digital business cards. However, don't expect things to stop there because in 2017, a Swedish rail line added microchip scanning as a payment option for train service. For train service. Now, again, imagine the abuse. Imagine this thing gets so widespread that you can't have a job or you can't be paid for your job unless you have a microchip. That is where it starts getting into Mark of the Beast territory. Again, you got to look at how this is going to be abused. Now, I mentioned before how we as Christians, we got to get good at being able to educate the culture on why this is a bad idea. Most people who are going for this stuff aren't Christian. Typically, most Christians are not going to be interested in this kind of thing. So given that, we have to be able to come up with good, logical, reasonable, scientific arguments on why this is not smart based on something else than the Bible. It's fine to have that as an argument for Christians, but non-Christians don't recognize the authority of the Bible. So for them, it's just not good enough to say, well, you can't do it because the Bible says so. Because they're just going to laugh in your face. They're not going to be convinced, and they're going to go get microchipped. So you got to actually have some reasons. Some reasons I like to bring up are the potential for abuse. How you can't trust any of these tech companies to protect your privacy. You can't trust them to not use your data for their own purposes. So how much more are they going to use that when it's implanted in your own body? And it's a lot more difficult to remove. Again, if the government or even just the tech overlords ever get tyrannical to the point that it does affect our day-to-day life, and I would say that we're there now, but a lot of people don't realize that. But if it gets to the point where it's just objectively, factually true, we can throw our computers away, we can throw our phones away, we can get rid of stuff. We still have that option. You may not have that option when microchipping becomes widespread and when it becomes accepted by most people. It's not going to be as easy to remove a microchip or a brain implant or something that's integrated into your own body. You're not going to want to cut your hand off just so Facebook doesn't target you with ads that you don't have any interest in. But of course, it goes further than just ads. It goes into personal information, health information. Imagine insurance companies who can measure your vitals based on a chip that you have in your hand, and they can increase your rates through that. So there's a lot of invasion of privacy type things going on here, and I like those arguments when trying to convince non-Christians of this kind of stuff. And then if they're interested, obviously you can talk about the mark of the beast stuff, but most non-Christians aren't going to be interested in that. So those are some good scientific, well-reasoned, logical answers for this. Now, it says in 2017, a Wisconsin-based company called 3 Squared Marketing made headlines when they gave their employees the choice to get microchipped. The chips for the company were designed to let the employees in the building use the copier and even pay for snacks. The public reaction to the controversial story was mostly negative. So that can give us hope. So that was in Wisconsin, that was here in the U.S., and this was just an option that this company gave employees. It wasn't enforced. It was just an option, and still the public reaction to this was negative. So that's a good sign. That's where we want to be. There are those, especially in the tech world, who are trying to normalize this stuff, though, and downplay the serious risks involved. So we have to stay awake, and we have to keep up to date on this stuff. Now, the main concerns that people have, according to this article, about microchip implants are primarily focused on privacy and cybersecurity issues. Yes, absolutely. It says, however, with the ubiquitous and sometimes careless usage of smartphones and wearables, the vast majority of users are already pretty vulnerable in those areas. Now, like I said before, I don't think that's a fair comparison because, yes, while our smartphones and wearable technology are absolutely infringing on our privacy, and we need to be cognizant of that, we have a much easier option to get rid of this stuff if we want to. It's really easy. And you know, I'm saying this as somebody who makes a living making videos online. It's probably a good idea to limit how much time you're online and to be really, really careful when you sign those agreements. You know, obviously nobody's going to read the whole thing. It's like 100 pages for each one. But you have to go through and at least know what they're asking you to give up. You know, what rights basically are they asking you to give up? We got to be aware of that. So I think and they sneak it in with those long agreements. That's how they do it, knowing most people aren't going to read it. But maybe it's time that we start paying attention to that stuff. I look at smartphones and all that stuff as just a precursor to where they ultimately want to go, and that's in this microchipping thing. Even on a spiritual level, how much better will our enemy be able to deceive us if we're welcoming this stuff and integrating it right into our own bodies? It's pretty frightening to think about how close we actually are to that, and in many ways are there now. To conclude this story, it says the implantable microchip does present some interesting practical applications, which is why some are enthusiastically embracing the idea of incorporating this kind of technology into their bodies. Still, with so many people against it, it's really too soon to tell which direction this trend will go in. I think they're going to continue to try to normalize this stuff. I think it will get more and more accepted, especially with young people, because that's where they're targeting anyway. But I think with older people, maybe people of like my generation and a little older, I think that we're going to realize the so-called practical applications are not worth the risk, especially with all the news stories coming out against Google and Facebook and all these privacy issues. I think those who are willing to look into these issues just a little bit deeper than what's provided by those who promote it, I think we're going to realize that, you know what, the risk is too great. I don't need to wave my hand over my lock to get into my house. I can use a key just fine. I don't need to store all of my passwords in a pill that I ingest. That is another thing they're developing, that I ingest every day. I can just remember my passwords or write them down somewhere, or use some other service like KeyPass or something like that in order to do it. So I think with all the options available that don't infringe on our privacy concerns, I think, I'm praying that more and more people are going to wake up and realize, you know what, this microchipping thing there's too much of a potential for abuse from those in power, from the tech elites. So that's my prayer, but I do believe, every generation, younger and younger and younger, is, just by nature, more and more ignorant because they're younger, they haven't been around as long. And because the tech giants are targeting kids, basically, teenagers and young adults, into this stuff, in those generations, I think that this is going to increase in popularity, and then we are going to look like just old fuddy-duddies who don't want to have any fun because we're going to be speaking out against it. And it's going to be, if you're around my age or younger, you may remember a time where there wasn't an internet. And do you remember, if you were a kid around that time, do you remember your parents trying to warn you about the internet? But if you were like me, you might have thought, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know about this stuff. I know. I'm the one that uses it. I know. And then when you grow up, you realize you really didn't know anything. I think we're going to see that. But the danger is, by the time these younger generations grow up to realize that they were ignorant when they were younger, a lot of the damage will already be done. They'll already have microchips, or they will already be biohacked, and that's something that can be passed on throughout the generations. They can ruin their entire family line and those of others in the world due to something like that. So the stakes are a lot higher, and that's why we need to keep up on this story. And of course, we at Into the Multiverse, we will keep up on this story as details develop.